What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to do with you guys. This is the Cold Steel AD-15. I have already reviewed the AD-10, and I think back on that video or on another Cold Steel knife, I said, nah, you probably won't ever see the AD-15 on this channel because I'm not interested in it. Well, my a very generous patron who I've mentioned many times on this channel, Mr. Harry Gage, was nice enough to not only be a patron, but provide multiple knives for review. And this was one of them, and I thought, you know what? This is a really popular knife. Despite my opinions of it visually, it probably is a good one to talk about. So now that I have it in hand, I'm really excited that I got over myself in terms of aesthetics, because this is super cool. Let's go ahead and take some measurements of this guy real quick. Overall length of the AD-15 coming in at 8, it's between 8 inches and 8 1/4, it's probably 8.1, 8.2, something like that. From tip to scale, you're looking at about 3.75 inches of blade. The actual cutting edge coming in at an impressive 3.6 inches. And I say impressive because there's finger choil there, slash sharpening choil, whatever you want to call it. That's pretty cool. How about some size comparisons? Up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1 coming in at 8.6 inches. Wait a second. Hang on a second here, guys. 8.6 inches on the Rat 1. Did I measure this incorrectly? Yeah, I did. I am stupid. This knife is 8.6 inches overall. I wasn't even looking at the tape. Jeez. Well, I know you guys would have corrected me, but either way, maybe I saved myself a little bit there. 8.6 inches overall on the Rat 1 and the AD-15. There is an angle on the camera here. It's making the AD-15 look a little bit longer, but these are about the exact same length. So if you're wondering about size in terms of length and you have a Rat 1, there you go. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? Up against the PM2, we're looking at 8.3 inches on the PM2, a little bit longer than the PM2 there. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall. And last but not least, the Spyderco Delica. Spyderco Delica coming in at 7 inches overall. Let me give you guys an example of the action here. This is very different in terms of a lock and in terms of action. The way that you disengage this, it took me a little bit, but this bar back here that operates with a spring, you pull it back as you're pushing forward on the blade, and that'll get the blade to basically disengage. Now, there is a thumb stud, I was holding it incorrectly there, that you can use to simply open the knife slowly, and that is also usable if you want to thumb flick it. Now, I haven't quite figured out the exact movement. See, I can get it there. And then in terms of reverse flick, I've gotten it once, but this is not a knife that I would say is really necessary to do a reverse flick. In terms of how the action feels, it's very smooth. This is a knife that I find myself just wanting to open like a normal human being and use two hands. I also find it one where I feel safer in general about closing it with two hands. I did get a little more used to it, closing it this way. The disengagement of that bar makes me feel a little bit uneasy because, like I said, it is smooth and this is a pretty big blade. It makes me think that maybe it's going to come out of there too fast. It's almost like a double detent. Like there's a detent when you disengage it and it wants to fire back into the handle. I don't think that's actually the case. I think that's me being fearful of a lock that does not come organically to me. It's something that, you know, this is something you're going to have to keep in mind with this knife. This is a very different mechanism than what we're all used to using, something that was designed by Andrew Demko, given the AD and the 15, and it's based on one of his customs. It's very different, and it's something you're just going to have to play with before you're used to it, but once you're used to it, just like with anything, you're used to it, and it's totally fine. Interesting mechanism. Let's go ahead and weigh this knife. This is a pretty big knife, keep that in mind, and with big knives comes generally big weight. You're looking at 6.46 ounces, which if you guys know, or if you've been subscribed to me for a while, you'll know that that's at the tippy top end of what I like to carry. I like heft and I like the feeling of solidity, so I'm okay with carrying knives between 4.5 and 6.5 ounces. So is this a knife that I'd be okay with carrying? Yes, it is. Is it a knife that everybody's going to be okay with carrying? No, probably not. Just keep that in mind. Normally I do a double weigh on that, but you get the idea. It's pretty heavy. So, like I said, this is an Andrew Demko design. based on one of his customs. Now, Andrew Demko actually designed and invented, if I'm not mistaken, the triad lock. And he also clearly invented this locking system here, which at the moment the name escapes me. I had it in my head and then I forgot it as soon as I started the video. Somebody in the comments section, if you want to list that for everybody, that would be great. If not, that's okay. But he's a person that's very interested in the potential durability and the capabilities of his tools, clearly, and he's designed some amazing stuff. The triad lock is widely considered to be the strongest locking system in the world. While I might consider it to be slightly unnecessary, I will admit it's very cool. I like the triad lock. I think it's neat. I also like the idea and concept behind this lock. We'll get into that. The custom version of this obviously runs a lot more. This version of it runs currently, I just looked at Knife Center. I imagine there's some other places. You know, there's always, you can get these on eBay and Amazon generally, sometimes a little bit less, but we're currently looking at a price of $202. Now, I remember when this first came out, it was less than that. I want to say it was like $180. So there's been a little bit of a price hike there. That's something you want to keep in mind before you buy this. We'll talk more about that here in a sec. What we have is a nicely satin finished, well, nicely other than my ugly fingerprints, drop point blade with a nice flat that carries about 80% the length of the blade. You can see AD-15 is listed there. I don't mind how that looks. That's fine. You have some thumb studs that are very big, but also very functional. You have some very aggressive jimping here on the back, but that goes along with the theme of the knife. This is obviously a hard-use folding knife, probably designed for somebody wearing gloves. So if you're going to be using your bare hands, yeah, it's going to wear into you, but if you're wearing gloves, it's going to work just fine. The blade stock thickness on this guy is pretty heavy duty. Up against the PM2's 145 thousand stock thick blade, you can see that this is probably at least 155 thousandths, possibly 165 thousandths, though my bet is 155. It does get reasonably thin behind the edge, though. There's plenty of room for it to drop, and it is plenty sharp. This is going to do a good job. Much like the AD-10, it's going to do a great job of fitting into a bunch of different roles. You've got a puncture tip, though the tip does maintain really good thickness all the way down to the edge, so there's a lot of durability here. You've got a really good slicing belly and good thinness behind the edge, despite it being pretty thick up here. So that's pretty cool. Taking a look at the other side, you can see this is a cold steel knife. It's made in Taiwan, and it's S35VN. So this is not an American-made knife, though the fit and finish, like most cold steel knives that I've handled, is really, really good. Let's take a look at this locking mechanism. So here's how this works. Like I said, I kind of pinch right here. I put my fingers and brace them on the G10 part of the scale, and then I push on the blade. And then what that does is it releases the lock out of this little slot right here, and it wheels around and then drops back in behind the tang of the blade down here. As you bring the knife back out, there's a bar here, stop pin, that eventually just drops right into that slot. Now, what you're left with is a system that, in the way that it looks, I have not tested this, the way that this looks is that it would be almost impossible to disengage. Certainly in the normal, the normal use position, how we're supposed to be holding knives and using them, like cutting, so the pressure is going to be on the blade. When you're holding it like this, you're putting even more pressure down on that, so that's not coming out of place. It's also not going to come out of place if you're cutting into something thick and wrenching around and pulling up and down. I would also imagine, though, that there's plenty of, pressure from that bar, and just feeling how, how that disengages, what you'd have to do. It's not just pushing on the blade. You also have to be lifting this up a little bit, so it doesn't feel like the type of blade that's going to disengage that way. This feels like a very strong locking mechanism. It's not only mitigating the pressure that would otherwise be put all on the pivot back to here in terms of up and down, but also left and right. I'm actually having to put an excess amount there to get it to disengage. It's not a sticky feeling, it's just pressure is what I'm saying. That pressure is holding everything in place. So there's no amount of force that I can think of that I could put on this blade that wouldn't destroy every other component around that locking system first before the locking system itself, which is, arguably something that almost makes the locking system unnecessary, but does it make it strong and reliable for what you would reasonably ask of a folding knife and possibly a little bit beyond? Yes, and for that reason, I think it's really, really cool. Taking a look here, you can see how thick it is. I mean, it's not, there was no slouching involved with the process of this. It's also fairly well rounded off, I mean, it's not I wouldn't call anything sharp, but I also wouldn't call anything ultra soft either. It's definitely rounded off all the way around. There's some nice texturing. If you like G10 texturing, it's fairly aggressive down here. You can see there's a nice Torx head pivot right there with a little bit of milling on there. The exact same thing, it's actually the exact same size as the pivot, is the screw that holds this whole system in. And like I said, there's a spring inside there. If you want to see a disassembly video on this, Nick Shabazz, of course, as always, has a disassembly of this knife. You can check that out. This also serves as a partial backspacer with a little bit of texturing right there. It's not sticking up too high, so I wouldn't call it aggressive. You do have some pretty thick steel liners that are sandwiching that piece in right there, and then sandwiching those are, of course, the G10 scales. Taking a look at the other side here, you can see that all the hardware is the same, meaning that these screws screw into these pieces here. Same way with the pivot. Those are either side of the stop pin there. You have a really, really awesome pocket clip. It's very similar to what you would see on a Spyderco knife. You can see there the Shaman is extremely similar in shape and length. I like that divot. I like the spoon shape. It makes it so that it's real easy to get over your pants pocket and real easy to get a hold of when you're trying to pull it back out. It's also similar in that it has the lanyard hole in the middle between all the screws. The shape of the screws makes sure that you're not going to have any play on the pocket clip itself while maintaining that retention, and you can fit your 550 paracord through there if you're a lanyard type of person. This is a knife that is fully ambidextrous, so you can flip the clip over to the other side. It's going to be a tip-up only carry knife, which I think is perfect. That's how I like to carry it anyway. But given the nature of this locking system, it's going to be accessible from either side. Like I said, I kind of prefer to just disengage this knife with two hands. It makes me feel like I've got a little bit more control over the knife. And, while deploying a knife with my thumb or with the rear finger or just in one hand in general is fun, I don't think that it's very necessary. I feel like the self-defense community is going to tell me like, well, the faster you can deploy a knife in a life-threatening situation. I'm not worried about life-threatening situations. I don't care. I'm worried about using the knife as a tool. So from a utilitarian standpoint, for the most part, in most circumstances that I can think of that would call for a knife like this, I'm probably going to be okay with opening it with two hands. Though there always is that ladder scenario I talk about where maybe you're up on a ladder, so you're already off balance, and you've got one hand that's busy. Sometimes it is convenient to deploy a folding knife with one hand, use it for whatever you need to use it for, and then put it away with one hand and back into your pocket. You can do this with this knife, absolutely, but you're going to have to really familiarize yourself with it. This is still a knife that I'm trying to get used to. And while, I'm not saying it's impossible, it's actually pretty easy, as you can see there. I just feel a little bit more comfortable like this. And here's why. A couple of times getting it all the way down to this position, I found myself in a position like right there, my finger's still up here, and it actually pinched my finger in between this metal piece and the scale. It doesn't pinch you very hard, but if you get your finger in exactly the right spot, it actually can hurt a little bit, and it's going to make you, withdraw your finger and possibly drop the knife. Depending on where you are when you've got the knife in hand, that might be an issue. I might be nitpicking, and I might just be awkward with this, so everybody's going to be a little bit different. Like I said, if you decide you want this knife, you're going to buy it, just practice with it. Before you take it out and you use it, this is one of those knives I actually would recommend to everybody. You should actually sit on your couch and play with this for a little bit until you're used to it, because then it's not going to feel weird if this is your dedicated, everyday, hard use tool that you're out on the, wherever you are. It's not going to feel foreign pulling it out of your pocket and deploying it. Otherwise, yeah, there is a risk of dropping it, And like I said, this is a knife that you can deploy or do the thumb flick with. It's just a little bit different, how the detent feels and how it works. You can see there that lift means that as soon as it's deployed, the handle actually expands, making it more of a thing for you to hang on to. But as far as your hand positioning, it does change a little bit. And it's weird. It's one of those things that's really hard to describe until you have it in hand. Anyways, this is a really, really intriguing knife. And in terms of your centering and your your lockup's absolutely solid. Up, down, left to right. I was expecting that. Taking a look at the liners there, they are solid, though there is this chunk that's cut out here to make room for the lock. So, I mean, either way, it's heavy. This is a big knife, but it's not nearly as big as the AD-10. For whatever reason, I assumed that the AD-15 was the exact same size as the AD-10, and the AD-10 is a monster. And I love that knife, but you really have to want to be carrying a monster. In that video, I said that the AD-10 might just be the most hard-use folding knife in existence. And it might be, but if it had a contender, it would probably be this guy. And at $200, you really are getting a lot of tool for that money. It bothers me that they raised the price a little bit. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure they raised the price a little bit. That bothers me. Just, you know, it's popular, so leave it where it's at, and then people can always say good things about it. You know, you don't have to deal with reviewers like me going, why'd you raise the price? You're looking at S35VN steel. You're looking at steel and G10 on the handle and a really, really interesting locking system. Obviously, a tool that was designed for hard use, and does it, you know, theoretically, do I think that it would perform well at those types of tasks? Yes, definitely. Plus, extra points from me because it's got a choil that I can easily fit my finger in. I can choke up on it. I like how this feels. It feels solid. For those of you who have that, you know, feeling you can't avoid, where you equate heft and solidity to value, it is definitely there with this knife. The moment that you unpackage this and get it in hand, you're going to go, yeah, that's a knife. That feels good. You know, ergonomics are great. I don't have a problem here. Pocket clip might dig into your fingers a little bit, but in terms of how comfortable it is to hold on to, it's excellent. In fact, I think if you're wearing gloves, you're really, really going to like that. This is a knife that I can recommend. I wish that it was back at its $175, $180 price, whatever it was. Maybe it was $185. I wish it was back there, but I don't think $200 is a bad price for it. It just put, you know, when companies hike the price on anything, it just puts a sour taste in my mouth. But if you're considering this knife, you need a hard use working tool, and you're okay with that $200 price tag, yes. If you're looking for a knife for EDC in your office, no, I mean, why? You know, this is not an EDC size knife. This is a knife that was designed for outdoor hard use. If you are aware of that and you're still okay with carrying a knife this big in that setting, then, you know, power to you. But yeah, for people looking for this type of knife, do I think that this knife is going to do what it's designed to do, you know, for the money? Yeah, absolutely. I think this is really, really cool. I'm glad that I got an opportunity to check this out because my opinion of it is much higher than I thought it would be. I think that's pretty much it. I think that's pretty much all I have to say about the AD-15. From what I understand, both the AD-15 and AD-10 are so similar to their custom counterparts. It's crazy. You know, a lot of people will go ahead and opt for the custom just for the exclusivity, which I think a lot of times, you know, obviously you're going to get more, you know, attention to detail in the final fit and finish. I've heard that edges are more rounded off in the custom, and of course you have the human attention that goes into a custom. So not only are you paying for exclusivity, but you're paying for somebody to make sure with their human eyes and their human hands that everything is fitting exactly the way as intended. I believe they're also hand ground. Does that mean that you're getting, I don't know how much a custom is, $800 to $1,000. Does that mean you're getting $600 to $800 less of a knife in the production version? No, I don't think so. In fact, I think you're close to maxed out in terms of cost to utility ratio in a knife like this. I think this is an excellent buy for a tool, and I think it's well worth the money. It isn't made in the United States. It's made in Taiwan, but even still, I think this is really excellent. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video or at least found it entertaining. If you did, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do of course have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check that stuff out. And if you enjoy all my content, then please subscribe to my channel because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.